Hello everyone and welcome back to Coin Bureau Clips. Now today we, I think, are setting a record for the most members of Team Coin Bureau on camera at one point. So this is an important day for all of us. Jessica and I are joined today by Dan, our head of research, and Taylor, our editor-in-chief. Now these are two of the guys who basically kind of run Coin Bureau beneath the surface. Whilst Jessica and I are out there on camera, these are the guys working behind the scenes to researching, writing, editing, doing all sorts. So two vital members of the team. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Guy.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Now, I think those long-time viewers of Clips may have encountered Dan and or Taylor before. But for those who haven't, can you guys just quickly give us an overview of who you are and your role here at Coin Bureau? Dan, kick us off.
Yeah, okay, I'll keep it as quick as I can. So I got into crypto in, I think it was 2018, lost all my first investment in Quadriga CX and this Canadian crypto exchange in 2019. Then later into 2019, started getting into crypto again, started working for a crypto startup in the Czech Republic. And then through this crypto startup, got acquainted with the Coin Bureau because we were looking for like YouTube channels to like market our product. And back then, I think Coin Bureau had like maybe 15 or 20,000 subs, like not very much. I saw on the website that you were hiring writers. So I started writing a couple articles and I guess you guys liked it, and I became a permanent member of the team, and then now I'm kind of the head of research, and most of the information, I guess you could say, in the videos on the YouTube channel are coming from here.
Absolutely.
That's the story.
Absolutely. What about you, Taylor?
Yeah, so I'll quickly just start with my journey into crypto as well. I like to say I used to work for the enemy. I was a financial advisor for one of the largest banks in Canada for a number of years. That was when I first heard about Bitcoin, but being indoctrinated into the traditional financial system, I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. But I always had a passion for providing financial education, which is why I became a financial advisor in the first place. And after a few years of that, it just felt a bit predatory. So I was like, this isn't what I'm after. Learned a bit more about Bitcoin, and I realized that Bitcoin was the potential answer to all the financial education I was hoping to give as a financial advisor. So yeah, down the rabbit hole, started looking a bit more into Bitcoin, started day trading it. I was a day trader for a while for stocks, Forex, and crypto, and just realized it's a pretty tough way to make a living. And similar to Dan, I saw the Coin Bureau was looking for researchers and writers, and I was working for a couple other crypto companies at the time. And I was like, hey, like Coin Bureau, they need people on the team, so I'd love to come over. Yeah, that was it.
Amazing. It's great to actually sit here. This is the first time that I've met you both IRL. So to get to pick some of your brains, because these really are the masterminds behind Coin Bureau and provide us with a lot of the content that we see on the website and also on scripts. So I'm curious to ask you both, when it comes to writing and preparing content, what kind of content is your favorite to dive into from a research perspective or from a perspective of reaching out to companies and entities and getting their opinion? Maybe Dan, we'll start with you because you said which am I?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so like recently, something that I've been really interested in is I guess like the crossover between like crypto and macro. I know that's like something that's really big these days, especially because like I think it's ever since the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates and everyone started looking, they were trying to look for answers, like why is the crypto market crashing? And everyone's like, oh, it's probably the Fed and because of the correlation with stocks, and stocks are crashing because of macro. But as time goes on, like I'm more like on the macro side, I'm more interested in like the geopolitical aspect of it. Like understanding that even like behind some crypto projects, you have kind of like US interests and like Chinese interests, you could say, and that a lot of the, I guess like even like the regulations and stuff that you're seeing, even for example, I'll give you a very simple example that like the European Union and the United States, so they're both trying to like develop like lots of renewable energy and trying to like, bootstrap like these renewable energy companies or whatever. And what the United States kind of did is they gave a huge incentive to all these EU companies to move from the EU and go to the United States to do all this renewable energy. And then the EU kind of like slapped them back by like introducing restrictions on big tech companies. And I think that even the EU's like the markets in crypto assets, like the fact that the regulations there are really good, I don't necessarily think that's a coincidence. It could be like a combination of they're trying to like, compensate for the fact that they're losing some of this industry to the US and trying to be more appealing to crypto, but also that maybe it's like slapping them in the face, like how you guys are like, you're banning it, but we're going to embrace it. Basically just to spite you kind of thing. And like, I don't know if that's the case or not, but this is kind of like the stuff that I've been watching closely. And whenever I view, like when I'm doing like research or whatever, and I'm viewing things through that lens, a lot of things start to make a lot more sense. And I guess I'll just leave it at that and pass it to Taylor here.
Yeah, so you asked what kind of our favorite areas are to dive into, and I'm not very good at instruction, so I'm actually going to give two because it's kind of a toss-up for first place. But I love the analytics companies like Asari, Glassnode, Dune. Anytime I get to reach out to them for research or work with them or work with any of their charts, I'm a sucker for charts and the pretty colors. But I'd say my real guilty pleasure, though, is I love looking into just the UI of crypto, so like the user interface, how we react with it. So it's a large criticism against DeFi in particular and self-custodial wallets, just how non-user friendly they are. So I really like to see some of the innovations happening in the space. So like hardware wallets, I review a lot of the hardware wallet content that we do. And I love seeing like innovations happening in the crypto storage space. There's some really interesting companies working on really interesting solutions for complex behind the scenes things. And it's, you take a look at the interface and it's like, hey, this feels like a Web 2 application, and you actually realize what's actually happening behind the scenes is quite complex. So I love anything like that. And Dan and I both really nerd out on the macro side of things as well, but I'll leave that to him because he can ramble on about all that stuff.
It's I mean, I think, Dan, one of the amazing things to watch from looking at your work and stuff has been how when we started, obviously we were really crypto focused, and because of the way the industry has evolved, now we do we have a big macro focus as well. And I mean, you've kind of learned on the job a bit with that, haven't you? I mean, when you started writing for us, when you started researching, did you know that much about macro?
I knew absolutely nothing, and to be honest, I think it sounds, maybe it's like a controversial take, but I think that even in crypto, whether it's crypto or macro, like to approach it kind of like from a blank slate and start from the bottom up, learning from the crypto side, I feel is almost more advantageous, because I think that one of the reasons why a lot of people who analyze crypto from like a TradFi lens, or people who have TradFi experience, I think Jessica's one of the only exceptions, to be honest, that you have TradFi background, you actually grasp it. But to a lot of TradFi people, especially that like are older and have been in the industry for a long time, they look at crypto, they're like, this doesn't make any sense to me, it doesn't fit into any of my models. But of course, crypto has completely different ways of valuing, and like not necessarily completely different, but it's a different framework that it's like, when people who approach it from like a TradFi are having already, I guess you could say, like some bias, that it makes it really hard for them to like wrap their head around what's going on. And I think the same applies to the macro side, where I actually, many of these concepts, like I'm still kind of like learning and understanding. And in a way, it's like through that experience of learning, I start like, because I'm starting from like a fresh ground, there's almost like no bias to like direct me, like to like push my brain in like certain directions. I just kind of like follow like whatever information I'm given. And typically, I mean, I guess it can result in like some pretty good content and pretty good analysis. So
Yeah, and I mean, the industry's changed so much just over the last couple of years, and I think that macro correlation is a big part of that, isn't it? It's gone from being this sort of niche thing that only a few people knew about to being this, this much more developed, this much more mature market. I mean, Taylor, you obviously have, because you have a slight sort of TradFi background as well. I mean, you must still have friends in that kind of realm. What do they make of the fact that you've come over to the light, as it were?
The more time that goes on, actually more and more people seem to kind of be coming over. One thing that I've noticed is in my previous crypto jobs, we seem to actually attract a lot of economists, people with economics degrees and backgrounds. It's almost like they're kind of more finely tuned in to just how fragile the traditional system is. And it is, as soon as they understand what makes Bitcoin such a unique asset, I think the puck kind of drops for them and they really get it. But as far as, my friends in TradFi, there's still a lot of people who are quite against it. And I understand, because again, I spent quite a few years not understanding it either and thinking it was a bit silly. And rainbow money, I remember we used to call it as well. We're like, that's silly rainbow money. But I wanted to build on something Dan said, though, as well, about the way that we're analyzing crypto movements and on-chain analytics and stuff as well. I think as this industry matures, we are learning more accurate and better ways to actually be able to just track money flow and stuff, right? And like correlation to things like the M2 money supply and things like that. So at first it was a bit of the Wild West, because like Dan said, it was, you can't look at these crypto assets and try and stick them into traditional means of measuring. And, there's no like profit and earnings reports and things like that. So thanks to some great work from a lot of good research companies, we're kind of figuring out how to get a better grasp and handle on how to actually value these things. So, I mean, that's where I think players like Raoul Paul come in as well, and they're doing great work with their kind of big picture analysis of all this stuff. So I love watching how it's all evolving and coming together.
Sorry to interrupt you folks, but I have to let you know about the Coin Bureau deals page. Now, my team and I have been able to pull together some of the best promos and discounts in the crypto space. We're talking trading fee discounts of over 50%, thousands of dollars in bonus airdrops, amazing deals at top exchanges, reduced prices on hardware wallets, and much, much more besides. So just go to coinbureau.com/deals, also linked to below, and find the promo suited to you. Enjoy the rest of the video. So tell us a bit both about the way that you work, because like Dan, I mean, I'm going to start with Taylor, because Dan, your way of working is just insane to me. But like, you know, because we at Coin Bureau, we're a pretty sort of lean team. Like, I think a lot of people assume that we've got sort of hundreds of people working here, and that is not the case at all. We've got a very small team working very hard. So how does your day, you know, how does that play out? How does it unfold? What's your process?
Oh man, I think you have to be very variable and nimble, right? I mean, the news changes and things happen so fast. Like I remember I was back my partner's from the UK, and we were back home visiting her family when the Luna collapse happened. And then all of a sudden, I remember with us, Team Coin Bureau, it was like all hands on deck. There's this big explosion happening, and you know, I'm looking at my schedule for the day, and I'm like, oh, I've got a pretty relaxed day. And then all of a sudden, that went right out the window, and then you know, things like that kind of come up. But yeah, with things like macro reports and stuff that come out, you really have to be kind of flexible and nimble. But I recently hired a few new writers for us as well, and one of the things I like to talk about in the interview process is Dan and I have a joke that it's sort of Coin Bureau is our main full-time job, and then we have another part-time job that just involves keeping up on top like with the crypto markets, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I generally get 14 newsletters a day, and so I scroll through that when I'm not at work, and we're always listening to podcasts. I know Dan and I are sharing an apartment while we're in Dubai, and we've always got podcasts going on like 2x speed, and it's like, listen to this, and Dan will be like, no, like I'm listening to this, and sharing stuff back and forth. So it is pretty hectic. I think we're quite blessed to have an obsessed team. I'd say we probably all have a borderline unhealthy obsession with crypto, and I think that's probably how we do it, to be honest. I mean, we're very dialed in, but yeah, just basically I've always got a screen in front of my face of one type or another, and that's how we do it.
Yeah, I think in order to work in crypto, you do have to have a pretty unhealthy obsession with it. It's not essential, but it helps. Is that? I mean, do you feel that, Jessica?
Oh, crypto never sleeps. You have to be on the ball 24/7. People that do not connect to Wi-Fi on a flight, I don't understand how they do it for a 12-hour flight. I'm like, how can you check crypto prices once you land in crypto Twitter? I feel like your day-to-day is equally as extreme as Taylor's, if not more so. Would that be correct in saying?
Yeah. And I think the only difference maybe is that I don't know, I can't speak to Taylor's schedule, but mine's, I think, a little bit more structured. It's like the content is the same, but the structure is maybe a little bit different.
Oh, I'm all over the map.
Yeah.
You can find me working at 3 a.m., 6 a.m., just whenever.
No chance. So I mean, I think I explained this, actually, we did an interview, if you remember, for Coin Bureau Clips a while ago. And what's nice is, and I will mention this because I think there was someone on Twitter or somewhere that was saying, oh, like I watched that interview and like your schedule, and I'm trying to do the same thing, and like it's working out really well, which is really nice. But so basically, I wake up every morning at 5 a.m., I have some breakfast, I go to the gym, I get back, let's say like around, 9:30, start working roughly around 10, and then I'm working from 10 to 8 p.m., and that's basically my schedule from Monday through Sunday. And if I have some time before bed, then I'll play a little bit of music, just like to get my mind off of all this crypto stuff. But that's basically my schedule, and typically I start by checking, like I have like and I highly recommend this. It's, I guess, similar to what Taylor does. Like the newsletter approach actually is a really good one, but I kind of prefer to go through things like manually, where like I will have like 20 or 30 tabs open by default. Like when I open my browser, it'll be like 20 or 30 tabs, and then I go through each one. And like the first few is like to get you warmed up is just like your like social media or whatever, just like a few emails, like, but then over time it gets like more complex, where you're getting into like more like, analyzing prices, macro news, and like this is stuff that I just check. I go through all these, like 20 or 30 tabs. That takes me typically around like an hour, sometimes a little bit longer. And by that point, I have like a sense of kind of like what's happened, I guess, since I've been asleep. But yeah, and then after that, I'll get to basically compiling. Depending on the day, it's like either writing or compiling, basically like a research document. Like when we're doing research for especially for a crypto project, I think my record research was over the span of 2 days, and this was for the video we did about Circle.
Oh, yeah.
USDC. The research document, if memory serves, was around 70 pages long. And I went all the way to the beginning. I like listened almost, realistically, like I can't listen to every, but I listened to almost every single interview that like Jeremy Allaire had done, kind of like from the earliest one I could find all the way to the present day. And I would listen to that at 2x speed in the background while going through every single headline I can possibly find, and like taking notes as I go along. And so that's kind of like, I'm basically just jamming as much information as I can. And then of course I stop like to eat, like have lunch and dinner. I have like all the meals are prepped for the whole week, so I don't go out to eat or anything. I just like heat up the food, and while I'm eating and then like doing dishes or whatever, I'm listening to like macro podcasts mainly. Like when I have this extra, because like all the stuff during the day is kind of crypto, but like to make sure that I'm still on like the macro page anytime I'm like eating or like doing something around the house, if I need to like quickly clean something, or if I'm walking to and from the gym, I'll listen to macro. And Real Vision, you were mentioning Raoul Pal before. Real Vision is, I do like definitely highly recommend. They do like a daily briefing with Maggie. I don't know what her last name is, but like it's really, really good. And I hear we'll be doing something similar. So hopefully,
Nice. It's in the works. It's in the works. So tell us, like, Dan, you've mentioned macro podcasts as being a big thing, a big part of your research. Taylor, you've talked about newsletters. So Taylor, can you just, for those watching who are looking on the lookout for news sources of info, what are some of your favorite top crypto newsletters that you read?
A really good one that I like is the Milk Road. I think you and I were talking about the Milk Road. Yeah, so that's a great one. It's short, sweet, condensed, and it's not technical or complex. And the guys are hilarious as well. Like every newsletter gives me a chuckle. TLDR Crypto is another good one as well. It just gives you the quick hits. And I think more recently, over the last couple months, I subscribed for CoinGecko Pro. And CoinGecko sends you, I think it's like 4 or 5 newsletters a day, and they've got some really good content as well. But I mean, I'm pretty dialed into Telegram channels as well. So I don't think a lot of people know, but there are companies like Masari have their own Telegram channel and things like that as well. So I'll usually just have a little, basically like a nonstop ticker tape going of Telegram news updates and stuff like that as well. So that's, I do kind of try and keep an eye on those as close as possible for sure. They're great.
There's literally sort of no end to the amount of sources that that are available for crypto news. It's kind of scary in a way. Dan, so you've mentioned Real Vision and their daily briefing. What other sort of macro podcasts would you recommend to people?
To be honest, what you kind of like, I guess I'll preface that by saying that what you learn is not so much like the macro podcast, but more like the people. That you start to realize that there's kind of like I don't want to say like an underground, but obviously you have like all these like presenters, like Jim Cramer's a great example, right? Like someone that like from TV. I know there's like a couple other like TV analysts that are probably like more well known to people who are in the United States. I honestly couldn't name them, but then like there's kind of like almost like an underground kind of like ecosystem of like macro educators and like people who are kind of like more independent, who used to work for media or used to work for hedge funds or used to work whatever, and they kind of like went on their own. And typically, like, I mean, my personal favorite, I guess the short answer is my favorite is Blockworks, but the kind of like caveat there is that what makes the macro podcast typically so good is the guests, and these guests are you'll typically find them on like any macro podcast. It's like the same, I would say maybe the same like 20 or 30 people that you typically see like on all these macro channels. And some of them are like really good. I don't know, I can list a few names, like, I don't know, like Mike Green, Bob Elliott, what's another one?
Weston Nakamura
is excellent.
I'll build on one as well is Darius Dale from 42 Macro. He's like excellent as well. So they really dive into liquidity and how it affects crypto markets. But yeah, he's excellent as well.
Darius is like a human super.
He's on the really Pomp podcast a lot as well, Anthony Pompliano. So yeah, anytime he makes content, I try and stay pretty dialed into that as well.
And most of these guys have their own YouTube channels too. Like Jim Bianco is another really good one, and so I guess to tie it into crypto is really funny that, so Jim is like he's kind of like a really intense kind of like speaker, and it's funny, you can like when I read his tweets, I kind of like read it in his voice, and he did a tweet about like this pump, if you remember, there was like Cointelegraph had put out this tweet that like, oh, the ETF has been approved and like Bitcoin pumped or whatever, and Jim Bianco like did like an analysis of this price on Twitter, and like the second sentence is like, I quite frankly do not understand this price action, and then like, and just like reading it in his voice is like, that's exactly what he would say. And anyway, but the analysis was like really good. And anyway, going on a tangent there, but yeah, and yeah. Milk Road, though. I got to get in on that.
So,
Yeah, Milk Road is great. Milk Road
I
is
think one
great.
of the interesting things as well, just to capitalize on while we are having this conversation, for a lot of people that are maybe new to the crypto space in the past few years, you've mentioned where you guys go for research when it comes to just general crypto news. But what about when you're looking into a specific project? Are there any kind of do's and don'ts that you would recommend? Because you've been in crypto. You mentioned that you got burned by Quadriga, so you are kind of an early bird in crypto, and you've been in the industry for a while as well. So maybe from kind of personal experience, and then also from Coin Bureau experience too.
Yeah, I'll field that one first. So I think one of the early mistakes that I think a lot of us make is you find the people, some of the key opinion leaders in the space, and you'll kind of latch onto them. But the beautiful thing with crypto is we don't actually have to do that. We can go right to the on-chain sources, right? So, I mean, it's really valuable to get comfortable with tools like DeFi Llama, DApp Radar, things like that. Again, I'm a huge fan of Dune. I'll use Dune Analytics a lot, things like Masari. So a lot of us kind of got, I don't want to say fool, but we all kind of drank the Bitcoin to 100K Kool-Aid in the last bull run. And that was because we were all kind of just stuck in this echo chamber. So now I think it's important not to get caught up in that echo chamber and just go straight, like, what are the numbers telling you, right? What's the data saying? Yeah. And the beautiful thing with crypto is you can find that stuff anywhere. So like I said, Masari, look into Bitcoin is a great free resource as well. It shows you everything that Bitcoin's doing. Dune, Glassnode, DeFi Llama, there's great stuff like that.
Yeah, for me, to be honest, and something that I've come to learn, I guess, is I would say that the most valuable resource is my research for like crypto projects is actually to listen to interviews like with the founders of the project. Mm-hmm. And again, I would definitely urge people is like when you're doing research on a crypto project, see if you can find like the oldest interviews that they did, like from the very beginning. And you can actually, what's really annoying is I don't know, it's something in YouTube's algorithm that like when you sort by date, it'll actually emit some of the results. It didn't used to do that, and that really, really pisses me off. Because then that means I have to go manually like through like the suggested, you know what I mean? Like instead of going by chronological order, I have to go kind of like by like the search popularity, and I have to like manually sort it in chronological order if I want to actually see everything, and it's really annoying. That's like a recent thing. Anyway, but it can really be eye-opening, especially to see how the opinion of like, or like the perspective of the founder has like changed over time. I think that if I'm not mistaken, that a lot of the VCs, like when they invest in crypto projects, they're always saying like the number one thing they look for is like founders. So logically, you should probably be doing the same thing if you're investigating a crypto project, because like, you know, you could say like, oh, like the on-chain doesn't look good, like everything doesn't look good, like the tokenomics aren't too hot, but then you like listen to the guy speak, and like the guy who's building it, and he's been like hyper-focused for the last 5 years, and this is what I'm planning to do, and it's stuff that you don't even, oftentimes they'll say things that you will never find on their website or the documentation or anything. It's just like, it's not even, it's just mentioned nowhere. Sometimes it's good things, sometimes it's really bad things. And then you realize like, wait a minute, like what did you say? You know, like, oh, like your crypto project was like funded by like BlackRock, like secretly, which is like, you know, depending on who you ask is like, you know, good or bad. Anyway, so that's what I would recommend is like to look, just see if you can find interviews with the founders, and you will not only will you find more information about the project, but then this founder will also often say like, oh yeah, and there's this other like similar project or other, like project within the ecosystem that the founder is watching. Not to like give too much alpha here maybe, but I honestly think that Charles Hoskinson is kind of like a really good example of this, where he will mention specific projects from the Cardano ecosystem. And when you have a project that has like an influential, like a founder who's as influential as Charles, then when he says, yeah, like, you know, he's naming off these projects, or even like when Vitalik's doing that, you probably want to take note, especially if they mention like a few times. And oftentimes it'll be like a small, like, you know, micro cap that you've never heard of. And it's like, well, if Charles has his eyes on it, and if he's like really bullish on it, and like, you know, says there's going to be all this stuff, then I should probably listen. Anyway.
We should probably mention white papers as well, obviously. It's should generally be the source of truth with the majority of crypto projects. And they're not the most exciting things to read, but you can typically find them on a project's GitHub or their website. But yeah, I mean, the white paper should really kind of be the ultimate source of truth with these projects as well. So it's a good one.
I guess I always find the white paper is a good place to start, because, you know, it obviously gives you an overview of the project. If it's well written, that's often a good sign for me. That's something I'm, you know, quite sort of big on. But also, you know, if you can smell BS from sort of page one of the white paper, you know, that's a big warning sign as well. A message to any sort of crypto founders out there. I should point out that Dan does the lion's share of the research for Coin Bureau Club, our new altcoin subscription service. So if you have done an interview and it's out there on YouTube, but it's only got 20 views and you did it 15 years ago, Dan will find it and he will watch it. Just so as you know. So he will it's amazing to see just how deep he will dig into these projects. And as I say, unearth some extraordinary information. But and often it's interesting as well, isn't it? Because so many projects start out as one sort of particular thing, and then they change over time. Either they kind of pivot because they realize that they're not getting anywhere, or market conditions dictate, or they or one thing or another. But that's often a really interesting thing to see, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most shocking too is I've come across some I guess you could say more personal. I'll have to explain this when I'm off camera, but I've come across some more personal things of some of these crypto founders and what's going on. So all I'll say is not only these interviews, be careful what you say, but also what you're doing on social media, because it's easier to find than you think. I
know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I've come across a few things. Yeah.
Anonymous gossip column coming soon, guys.
Yeah.
So then I was going to pick their brains a little bit more. So this is pure kind of alpha content on how to research into a project. So I'm curious now to get your perspectives and outlooks maybe on what you are looking out for personally from a crypto outlook. I mean, we're kind of entering Q4 of 2023, where you guys are looking at personally when it comes to what kind of things are of interest to both of you, maybe some trends you guys are expecting to see.
Yeah, I'll field that one first as well, I guess. I'm really kind of trying to look into overarching narratives. And Guy, you did a really good video on this a while ago. So privacy, but not just in a sense of privacy coins, but actually privacy networks. So things, there's some interesting protocols out there that have privacy built kind of into the network themselves. So Secret Network's a pretty old school one. Oasis Network is an interesting one as well. But I think decentralized data storage is going to be big as well. So I've always got a bit of an eye on are we Filecoin, things like that. And I've always been a huge fan of Ethereum alternatives as well. I mean, I think it's no secret that Ethereum has got a lot going for it. But I was recently at ETH Milan, and I got to speak to a few developers there that are working on some interesting zero knowledge tech. And the one common theme that I kept hearing from a lot of them is that Ethereum's biggest issue right now is it's just fragmented, right? It's you have to have liquidity on all the different layer 2s. There's the Ethereum base layer, and then there's optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, and it just goes on forever. And it seems like every week there's another Ethereum layer 2 out there, and it's a bit messy, especially from a user perspective as well. So there's a couple fairly prevalent themes this year with Ethereum, and it's chain abstraction and account abstraction. And basically what that is I want to quote a friend of mine. We were talking about how it's use cases, not technology, is going to drive crypto adoption. And he talks about his PlayStation. He's a gamer. And he says, I don't know how my PlayStation works. He's like, there could be fairies in there for all I know. And he's like, and I don't really care. He's like, I just want to play video games. And I think for the end user, that's what they care about with Ethereum as well. And it's for anybody who's ever tried to bridge tokens to another layer 2 or hook up a MetaMask wallet. It's not very user friendly, and it's not familiar either. I don't know if you guys remember what it was like your first time setting up a MetaMask wallet, but I remember finding it really weird. All of a sudden, there's a little box pops up on your screen and you're signing transactions, and you're like, before DeFi, you've never really had to do anything like that. So to make a long story short of that, so I'm really looking at, there are projects that are working on chain abstractions, so DAppOS is an interesting one, and the Ethereum alternatives as well, because I'm like, if Ethereum's so kind of fragmented and it is quite a mess, I was like, there are really interesting projects like Near Protocol and Algorand and Cardano, which I actually feel are technologically superior. I mean, they might not have the network effects, but from a straight up technical perspective, I'm like, they've got legs to run if they got, the right teams behind them and things like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I could go on all day. I'm looking at a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. For me, I guess I have a little bit of a more controversial take. It's something that I'm almost 100% convinced, and maybe I'll be wrong, but who knows? So what I'm personally right now not watching any altcoins per se. I know which I have a sense kind of which altcoins I want to pick up. Similarly to Taylor, I'm looking at Ethereum alternatives mainly because the ROI is probably going to be larger. And my end game, I guess, is to accumulate just more Bitcoin for the time being. At least, who knows? Maybe things will change. I like Ethereum insofar as you can use it as collateral in DeFi that's been battle tested, and that allows you to kind of get leverage through. It's like if you're trying to like get leverage through crypto, it's like the best way to kind of do that is through Ethereum, in my opinion. So that's, for me, that's like the main value proposition for ETH, at least like for the medium term. Obviously there's like, with all the layer 2s and everything else, and anyway, but no, so I'm not really like thinking of accumulating any altcoins. I haven't like accumulated any more Bitcoin, and like for now I'm waiting because I do still think we're going to see a second leg lower, and this is for many reasons. One of which is that we saw like a double top, so it just seems like in the last in the bull market, because we hit whatever it was, 64K and then 69K, and like sometime later, and it feels intuitive that we would see something similar on like the downside. I know like the kind of like red flag for me was like when FTX. So first of all, it's like everyone's like, oh, like FTX was the bottom, and like everyone was so convinced is like, this is it, like the exchange crash, like the sentiment's so bearish, like now's the time to buy. And the fact that like every single person, even like people who I would not consider to be like, Raoul Pal, like bless him, like I honestly think he's a really great analyst and everything. But the fact that he was like completely unfazed, he's like, yep, this is the bottom and I'm buying. And I'm like, this does, and that he was not the only person doing that. These are people who you would not, I guess, traditionally associate with crypto, although like Raoul Pal has been in it for a while. But like just seeing like, people who are quote unquote like experienced being like, oh yeah, like this is totally fine. Like I'm just going to buy the dip here. And then like you even see the length of the time that we spent around this 15K range was just like a couple of, like I think even like a month or two, not even. And compare it to like previous bear markets, you're like, this doesn't feel like that was the catalyst that was actually the bottom. And especially when you consider that FTX itself, like yes, it was like $10 billion worth of losses or whatever the amount is, but the amount of users FTX has was not even that many. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was only a few million or maybe like 10 million or something, compared to like, these other exchanges like Binance and Coinbase that have like hundreds of millions. So you're saying, oh, like FTX going down was the bottom and it was like the most cataclysmic thing to happen to crypto or whatever. It's like, in my opinion, like Terra was way more traumatizing than that, as like someone who was trading, because that was really like all these DeFi ecosystems getting just absolutely gutted because UST was on every chain. That was something to me, like you're looking at that and it's like, that is actually more like something, a catalyst that would be like a bottom. But the thing is that was kind of more niche in the sense that it was really the people who were in DeFi and in whatever that felt it the hardest. We still haven't seen something where even from the people looking on the outside in, and like many would argue that it's FTX, I don't think that it is. But anyway, I keep like running around in circles. My point, like the other reason why I think that we still haven't seen the second leg lower is because, so now there's like all these spot Bitcoin ETF applications, right, that are in process. And this is like a controversial opinion on my part, but I personally think that it's obviously it's bullish in the long term because I do think it's going to get approved, but I think it's actually extremely bearish in the short term. Why? Because the SEC has consistently said noted in kind of like the reason why it rejects these ETFs is because it doesn't trust that the spot market, it doesn't have like enough oversight of the spot market because most of the trading happens offshore on offshore exchanges against like USDT, right? And so when I heard that like spot Bitcoin ETF is going to be approved, like in the back of my mind, I'm like, this almost like requires that the trading volume be like taken offshore and like back onshore, which requires a disruption of this offshore industry. Which it doesn't mean that like exchanges necessarily go down or anything, but it almost like requires that there's going to be this pull. And even BlackRock in its recent amendment on the October 18th or whatever, everyone was like, going crazy. All this amendment is like so awesome. I think it included like the mention of the seeding or I don't know, whatever else. But one thing it also mentioned in there, and I think we mentioned it, I forget if it was in the news or which one, I think in the news, yeah. Where it actually included a mention, it said, yeah, like, they added a sentence in there saying like, the Bitcoin market basically is like opaque and unregulated and whatever. And like, this could pose a risk to people who hold like this shares, which like, you're looking at that and you're like, yeah, like, the issue is like the underlying issues haven't been addressed. And like, I know the SEC is like super biased and they're all really, crazy and they have bad regulation and everything. But this is one of those things where I can kind of agree. It's like, well, no, there actually maybe does need to be a little bit more transparency around that before you can have like a spot Bitcoin ETF. And I think that especially now with all the stuff that's happening, I'm not going to, use any words to get the video flagged, but all the stuff that's happening in the Middle East around like, crypto being used for certain types of financing. And then now Cynthia Lim is coming out and that she says she wants Binance and Tether investigated. And she's supposed to be the most pro-crypto politician. Like that's, to me, it's like a writing on the wall. It's like that they're getting ready to find an excuse to kind of like, remove some of the influence of this offshore industry, bring it onshore. So then that way that the SEC can approve it comfortably from their perspective. And that process is going to be painful and it's probably going to result it could result in a lower low for Bitcoin. I actually don't think that's possible at this point. Maybe we'd fall down to like 20K, but given how much Bitcoin dominance has risen, that would actually translate to new lows for most altcoins in like fiat terms because Bitcoin dominance has grown so much. So and anyway, so that's kind of like what I'm waiting for is, and maybe I'll be wrong, but I just
Hopefully
keep thinking,
you're wrong.
yeah, I just keep thinking back to what happened during the last bull run, and because I think this is what like many of us are doing, including you. We were having this discussion earlier that you think like, okay, like during the last bull market, like what did I do right and what did I do wrong? Like like what was the thing that I did right and what I did wrong? And I keep thinking about it's like what was my strategy even? Like I didn't really have a strategy, and it was just a coincidence that in my case I started accumulating altcoins around the halving, and this is when like there was not really any interest in altcoins, and also this is around the time that there was the pandemic flash crash. So it was just by sheer coincidence that I was accumulating around this time, and just even like historically, like the Bitcoin dominance should continue to rise until around the time of the halving or leading up to the halving, depending on the halving. It's like it can vary, but basically that. At least I guess I'm not going to be touching altcoins until the halving, and I'm going to try and like replicate the same thing. If it turns out that like Bitcoin has rallied even more, then great. But I think that even then, on like an ROI perspective, like the altcoin returns will still be really good. Like maybe I'll miss out on some gains between now and then, but I do think that the scenario, in my opinion, is skewed to the downside for the reason that I just mentioned. That I do think there's going to be a disruption of this offshore, and I apologize for like running around in circles there and dragging out the time a bit. But
I'm a big fan of like the DCA in and DCA out. So it's like dollar cost averaging for you guys who don't know. But so I guess we have a couple different approaches. Dan's waiting for the next leg lower, and I'm just looking at what were the previous all-time highs, and these are still like bargain sales. I'm not deploying all my capital, but nibbling every time there's a couple percent dip or 10-20% dip in our case in a lot of cases. But yeah, just over the next couple months. I mean, none of us know how long this bear market's going to play out, right? So it's I'll chuck some money into coins that I'm looking at like every few weeks, every month sort of thing. Because I don't try and time the market.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to try and time it.
If anybody can do it, Dan, it's you.
Yeah.
Two very different strategies. Okay, well, to finish up then, this kind of talking about all the potential landmines lurking out there in the crypto space, this reminds me a great way to finish would be to talk about self-custody, which is obviously the most important thing you can do in crypto. So I'm going to ask all three of you in turn, starting with Dan, just very quickly. What self-custody options are you using? What wallets do you use, hardware and software? Dan?
I'm going to try not to be too controversial. I'll keep it short. So I use Trezor. I've tried Ledger. I didn't like it, and I don't like, and maybe someone can fact check this, but there was I'll never forget this headline from Cointelegraph that when FTX was collapsing, that the Ledger Live software was not working, and that's not supposed to happen when an exchange is going down. I don't know if it's because there was like overload of the software, too many people trying to transfer, or whatever. I don't care what the circumstance. I don't care about the details. That is not supposed to happen when an exchange is going down. So that's kind of like one thing I'm on the lookout for. I know that Trezor also recently had like potentially some like leak of like a personal data. I think that's still being investigated. But I personally use Trezor. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I'm based in the Czech Republic, and so are they. But I've tried a few hardware wallets, and they're either like way too kind of like excessive and elaborate or whatever, or it's just or there's just something that like that just puts me off. But I use Trezor, and I guess I just use Trezor. That's it. I don't typically and if I'm not doing something with my crypto, then it's in a Trezor, and I don't often do things with my crypto, so it's in a Trezor.
Saucy answer.
School.
Okay, so I'm also an old school fan of Trezor. I've been using it for a while, but I think it's hard for a lot of newer wallet companies to kind of break out because Trezor and Ledger really overshadow the market. But there are a lot of really interesting advancements that are happening that people aren't really privy to. So while I use a Trezor just because it was one of the first things I used and it's just where a lot of my funds are, but more recently I've really adopted. There's a wallet called the Engrave Zero, and there's another one called BC Vault, which I recently reviewed as well. And what I really like about those two wallets is they're actually more secure than both Trezor and Ledger because they've reached a higher certification levels. So the Engrave Zero actually has the highest certification you can get, higher than both Trezor and Ledger combined actually. So the Engrave Zero is really cool. And the BC Vault is also really secure. And what I really like about the BC Vault is there's no recovery phrase. So there's no like single point of failure. You don't have to worry about somebody finding your words or the dog eating the piece of paper or anything like that. It uses like an unencrypted SD card, which is really cool. So, and you can't decrypt that unless you've got like the PIN and the passcode for the device. So I'm a big fan of that. And another reason why those two really stand out for me is because they don't actually come preloaded with the private keys. So there's an element of trust that we all need to have with companies like Ledger and Trezor or Ellipal, anything that comes with the seed phrase preloaded. It's really unlikely, but how do we know that those seed phrases aren't recorded on some server somewhere, right? So both the Ngrave and the BC Vault, when you get the device, the BC Vault, you have to shake it, and the Zero uses ambient light, and then from there you can actually shuffle your private keys as well. So it's impossible that nobody could know that prior to you setting up the device. So those are two very highly secure devices. So over time, I'm actually shifting more and more funds away from Trezor, and I'm really trusting the BC Vault a lot. And yeah, the Zero as well. I think the only downside with the Zero is it's quite expensive though, but it's, I mean, you get what you pay for, right? I mean, the thing's like a brick, it's made out of metal as well, really secure. And yeah, for that security, you kind of pay for it. But those are the ones that I use. But also just on a quick side note is they're not great for DeFi integration. So that's actually where I use the LPL for DeFi, because it's got like built-in dApps and everything as well. So I like the LPL because it's kind of like a nice mix between like the convenience of a software wallet but the security of a hardware wallet. So that's great as well for anybody who kind of wants to degen out into decentralized finance. You can do it right from the LPL Titan wallets, which is really cool.
There is a man who has arguably spent too much time around crypto wallets.
Yes, entirely.
No, but this is so useful actually, because I think the last 15 months I've really put it onto myself that I have to be more committed to self-custody of more complex wallets. Before that, there was, I tested out a wallet called Ballet. It was by Bobby Lee. And that was like a really physical, have you heard of it? No. It's like a very physical, it looks like a debit card. And that for me, as a kind of newbie into self-custody back in like 2018, was a really easy way into it. And obviously in the past year and a half, we have seen more of a need now more than ever. So I'm kind of also listening like, okay, I need to check out these because I have a Trezor, I have a Ledger, and I'm constantly looking for ways as someone that's not particularly technical, and I always kind of highlight this, to make it the easiest way possible, that when I'm explaining to normies, they look terrified that everything is accessible through this device. So I think it's definitely interesting. I'm absolutely going to check out BC Vault.
Yeah, it's an excellent product for sure. I like it.
Well, yeah, there are lots of options out there, aren't there? I've been hearing a lot about Tangem as well. In fact, a member of the Tangem team gave me a wallet at Token 2049, which is sitting on my desk and I need to play with as well. So I guess the moral of this story is there are tons of self-custody options out there. And as anyone here at Team Coin Bureau will tell you, if you are not doing self-custody, you're not doing crypto right.
No.
Absolutely.
Dan, Taylor, I can sense just sitting next to you that you're both itching to get back to work. That's just the sort of obsessives you are, which is why you make such great members of Team Coin Bureau and why it's so great to work with you both. So thank you for joining us today, for talking to us and the viewers about how you go about your work. It's great to have you here at HQ in Dubai, and hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks guys.
So
Jessica, that was great.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, everyone. We'll leave links to those wallets that Taylor was talking about and other resources down in the description. You've been watching Coin Bureau Clips. See you again soon.